In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, we are going to go away from talking about 2025 NBA draft prospects. This prospect isn't even in the 26 or even 27 NBA draft. We are talking about the guy. I'm sure you've seen the videos of him, Mohamed Dabone, who is playing for Barcelona. He is one of the most intriguing long-term NBA prospects I've ever seen. But the question is, how old is he? Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, along with my co-host for today, Alec Kichian. You know him as Draft Point or NBA Draft Point 2024. But if you follow international basketball, he is a must follow on Twitter, or I guess it's called X, but I guess it will forever be known as Twitter to me. But he is a must follow. I mean, he's breaking down all the top prospects, covering all the top tournaments overseas. But before we get into this episode to talk about the most intriguing long-term prospect in the world, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start this season with a big return on FanDuel. All you have to do is place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And if you are not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please like, share, comment, and of course, subscribe. Make sure you click the bell so you can be notified every time we drop an episode, because we are coming at you with episodes every day, at least every weekday, 5 days a week at the minimum. So 20 episodes a month, but my goal is 20 through 25. All right, let's get started. Mohamed Dabone, I'm sure you've seen the highlights, whether it's on Instagram or Twitter, of just this Giannis Antetokounmpo-like prospect that is, I guess, the biggest concern. We'll get right into it. The biggest question is, how old is he? I've seen him listed at 11. I've seen his birth date as 2011?
Yeah, the main thing, or Barcelona lists him as 2011.
2011. And then I've also seen where someone had I guess it was like the FIBA 3-on-3 profile where it said he was born in, was it 2009 or 2008?
I think 2008. I'm
I
not
think it's
exactly sure though.
2008. Either or. I mean, he is a very controversial prospect in a sense. And the controversy doesn't lie in his talent and his upside. It's just strictly about how old is he. So before we get into that, my question for you, is Dabone legit?
Yes, he's very legit. The fact that he's 12 or 13 supposedly playing U18 competition and is
That sounds crazy.
probably a top 2, 3 option on this Barcelona team, I think that makes him pretty legit. Like, he didn't have maybe as dominant of a tournament as you'd think or some people expected. I saw some articles saying he didn't reach their expectations, but the fact that he's 12, 13 and he's averaging like what, 14, 7, 2 blocks on nearly 70% shooting. I think that's pretty legit, pretty impressive. So that's kind of the cloud with him.
Yeah, so I mean, I think right now the expectations are getting ridiculous, because even if he were born in 2008 and he put up those same numbers, people would be, I mean, those are pretty impressive numbers, because a lot of the prospects at the U18 are what, 2007 born?
Yeah,
2007 born?
2007 now.
So to me, he those numbers are fine. Now, if he's 12 or 13 or however old that, some of the reports say is, that makes it even more impressive. So I want to just talk about the age and the cloud of mystery. Can you share a little bit about his background?
Oh, he's from Burkina Faso. That's what it says.
Yep.
He's joined their team last year, or he was on their junior squad, their not junior, but infant squad, I believe. He played
Yeah.
in mini cup with them, and he was absolutely dominating the competition. And that's where kind of the intrigue started with him. Of like, there's a guy, he's like 6'10", he's dunking every possession. He has these like 2-hand snatch blocks every possession on defense, and you're like, okay, well, this guy, he can't actually be 12, 13 like they list him. Then he joins their U18 team last year. So basically, he was playing against 2006 born players as a 2011 born player in ANGT last year, and he had a 21 point, 9 rebound, I think 7 of 8 from the field performance, where he made a three as well. And that's where kind of like the intrigue all went crazy of like, okay, so it's not only against kids you can do this, you can do this against like pretty much everyone.
Yeah, it's the buzz surrounding him is crazy. I remember when it first hit social media, and I can go back as far as like NBA All-Star Weekend 2024, and I was at Basketball Without Borders, and I mean we're talking about an event that had Common Maluwalch in there. Nolan Trayor played in it. Ben Seraph, New York Dallas. I mean, a lot of the top 2006 born players. I mean, Hugo Gonzalez wasn't there. Igor Demin wasn't there. But there were a lot of guys. I mean, several guys that I think are going to be in the 2025 NBA draft or at this tournament. But Dabone was a hot topic. And I spoke with one. He's a very prominent NBA agent, and he's based out of Europe. And his comments to me were, why are they lying about his age? He wasn't born in 2011. He's 16 years old. And this agent's question is, if he's legitimately 16 years old, he is still the best prospect in Europe long term in that generation. So there's no need to lie and say that he's 11 or 12 years old. Now, of course, again, anytime, whether it's in the United States or across the world, anytime there is like a really, really advanced prospect that happens to be like super tall and coordinated, there are going to be concerns or questions about when they were born. I mean, I remember hearing stories about when LeBron was a kid, his mom had to bring his birth certificate because people thought he was older. Same thing with Greg Oden, even though Greg Oden really looked a lot older than he was. And that's pretty common. But it's usually a 2 to 3 year difference max. But this is like 5 years where a player is 5 years younger than the competition. And he is easily one of the best, if not the best long-term prospect. But then you're thinking like, this is really, really like long term. So it's pretty crazy just to that we're talking about this guy if he's legit born in 2011 on an NBA draft podcast. Like when you first saw him play, like what was your initial thoughts and impressions?
Well, the first clip of him I saw was the snatch block I was talking about, the
Mhm.
two-hand snatch block that he just jumps up, he grabs it off the rim, like pretty much, and it looks insane. His second jump is one of the most ridiculous things I've seen. If he's actually 13, that's the part that made it less believable, I think, because, you know, and we'll talk about this a bit later. Like in the tournament, he actually did look like a kid. He looked like he was younger. I know that's crazy to say because he's 6'11", but I feel like his mannerisms of him walking up and down the court kind of does feel a bit younger. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing I saw. So I saw the clips. I was like, there's no way this is real. And he started playing the NGT and they listed him at 2011. And I was like, at this point, if they list him at 2011, there's pretty much no way they're gonna really change that at this point. Like he's
Yes.
probably gonna, yeah, he's gonna ride with Barcelona until he's draft eligible, pretty much, I would assume. And he's gonna play for the main team sooner rather than later. It's gonna be a big story. Well, he's 14, 15 playing for the main team. And that's pretty much what's gonna happen, I think, with him. Is that we'll never really know until we get to draft time, you know.
In what year? I mean, it's too far for me. Like I struggle, thinking about next week. But what year is he draft eligible?
2031, 2030, something like that.
2030, 20. That's crazy. All right, when we return, we're going to talk and dig a little deeper into his scouting report. I have my scouting notes. And again, just the fact that I have a scouting notes and a report on a kid that was born in 2011 is absolute crazy. And if you look at my scouting reports, it's not one of those things where I'm talking about what he can be. I'm talking about what he is right now, which is pretty darn impressive. Before I get into my scouting report on Dabone, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And if you are an NFL fan, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Why? Well, I forgot to mention that FanDuel is America's #1 sports book, but FanDuel has something different this year. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can actually go and check out the latest stats. You can view the live play-by-play and so much more. And it's on the same page where you place your bets. Also, you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. All you have to do is place your first $5 bet, and that's at fanduel.com, which is America's #1 sportsbook. Once again, thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. Now, for your second listen, you got to check out the Locked On NBA podcast because the NBA season is, I was going to say it's in full swing, but training camp started today. But even then, there was no offseason on the Locked On NBA podcast, and you're going to get daily basketball analysis from the national and the local experts, and you get it in 30 minutes or less. So it's something you can listen to on your commute to work or home or while you're at work, 30 minutes or less, and no one is going to keep you as informed or as entertained as Locked On NBA. It is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, I want to just dig into my personal scouting report on Dabone. He's 6'10", so that's already crazy. The fact that he is 6'10" at 13 years old, and we're just going to go ahead and say he's 13. And here's my scouting report on him. Athletic big with NBA positional size and length, bouncy, quick twitch vertical pop, quick off his feet, excellent rim runner, and excellent potential as, just more than a rim runner. Elite transition finisher, can out sprint bigs down the floor. He's built and he moves like a younger Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's a vertical lob threat, has like crazy potential as a rim protector and shot blocker. I put that he's not afraid to let it fly from deep. He does shoot threes, which tells me that he's been working on it. And if he hasn't been working on it, I guess maybe the coach just says, hey, you've blocked 8 shots this game, so we'll go ahead and give you the freedom to shoot threes. But I do like the confidence that he is shooting threes or trying to shoot threes. Some of the misses look really bad, but I've also seen him make some. He's active on the offensive glass. My concerns are, it's kind of nitpicking to write concerns about a 13-year-old, but I do have that he does lack shooting touch, and there are times where he just looks really raw and unpolished. But that kind of adds to the mysteriousness around him because, like you said, sometimes you can watch him play and you can see the mannerisms and you can say, okay, he's young. He doesn't have the
Yeah, or
mannerisms or the maturity yet of, a 17 or 18-year-old. But then you look at the body, and it's just some of the plays are just like the way he dunks the ball looks like an NBA player finishing the dunk. I don't know how to explain it, but it's just like the power that he goes up with, the way he finishes. Either he's been watching a lot of Giannis or NBA type players. It's like a huge, I don't know, gap between the body language and then the crazy plays that he makes. But then if you look at his face, he does look young. He's not like he's got like a mustache or a beard. He looks young. So it is a cloud of mystery surrounding him.
yeah, look, in the tournament, he had great moments. He had moments that maybe were less great. Like if you go through the entire tournament and see like his different games, he had 2 games that were like specifically really, really good. And if you look at the highlights are ridiculous. Like one thing that caught my eye specifically was like he didn't put up big assist numbers, but he had these like outlet passes that looked really, really good. Like that he like threw the ball from one end to the other. And it does help that your team is really good and some of the teams you're playing against aren't exactly on that level. But he looked every bit as much of any 18-year-old athlete out there playing. He had these like transition dunks. The transition offense is really, really great for his age. And the fact that they're running a lot of the games through him at this point, like they lost a lot of their main scoring options last year with Damesar on their main team now, Kasparis at Illinois, and right now they're running most of their offense through Dabone and Arturas Butayevas, I believe. How we say?
Yep.
Yeah,
The
and
Lithuanian kid.
together they've made for a pretty good front court. Like them plus Sion Keita plus Abraham Kone, they have one of the deepest, biggest, tallest front courts out there in U18 basketball. So just in general, the offense looks pretty good. Like again, there are times like let's say when he matches up against or he matched up against two of his worst games were against Olimpia Milano and it was Basconia, and he matched up against Luigi Swigo
He was like 7'1" or 7'2".
and Abraham João Makerbol, who's
Yeah.
also 6'11", and those were his toughest matchups where you can really tell that maybe he wasn't as ready to match up against guys like that, but against everybody else, he looked pretty damn good offensively.
Yeah, and both of those guys are legitimate high major prospects or even NBA prospects. And
Yeah.
again, if Dabone is 13 years old, that's pretty impressive. I don't really have a comparison for like him as far as just from a scouting perspective. The only thing I can think of, and this was probably 2000, I want to say it was 2016. It was actually my very first international tournament that I scouted. It was in Turkey. I think there was like some civil unrest in Turkey that year. And so they ended up having like the U18s in December. And so I went to this tournament. I just remember it was some city outside near the Black Sea. And there was this prospect that I saw, and I was like, this dude is the best player on the floor. And this tournament had Isaiah Hartenstein played in the tournament. Frank Ntilikina was in the tournament. Jean Musa was in the tournament. But the player that I'm talking about was Sekou Doumbouya. He was absolutely phenomenal in the tournament. There was not much, spoken about him prior to that. I had to like go and find the roster online to see who he was, but he absolutely like showed like tremendous flash and potential. But I remember like in my notes, and this is like the first tournament that I scouted. In my scouting notes, I'm like, this kid is super immature. During the layup lines, he's just goofing around. He's throwing up shots. He's laughing, so on and so on. And then like if you travel overseas, and this was again like 8 years ago, so like the Wi-Fi was bad, so I had to wait until I got back to my hotel on the computer to read up about him. Then I realized like he was 14 playing in a U18 tournament. So at that time I was like, this kid is going to be the number one pick in the draft when the first year that he's draft eligible. He didn't end up being the number one pick. I think he was like the 15th pick. He's out the NBA. But I think Sekou is an NBA talent for sure. Long story short, what I'm saying is that with Dabone, I'm seeing like, I mean, his physical tools are better than Sekou's, and Sekou had great physical tools. But you can see like the game, his talent and his skill level is ahead of his maturity as far as like body language and overall approach to the game. And so over the next few years, it's going to be pretty interesting to monitor how it catches up, because at some point you're going to imagine he's going to end up getting some time on Barcelona's senior team. But is he going to be mature enough? Is he mature enough, and is he going to be ready for that? That's like one of my questions. And
I mean,
actually, will he, because he's so talented, will he be will he have the opportunity to mature? Because usually when you're that talented so young, you're kind of coddled and you're kind of enabled, and I feel like you skip certain like steps in like your maturation period and your progression. And that's one of my concerns about Dabone.
the thing is, if you really think about it, this guy can be playing in the next 6 or 7 Adidas Next Generation tournaments. He could have like 7 underneath his belt, and I could just imagine like what he will look like by that time. Like if he's built like this already at 12, can you imagine him at like 17 playing in that tournament? Built like Giannis, probably dominating the competition with all these years underneath his belt. That's why I'm thinking likely after a few years they might shut him down if he's really that good. Like I think Luca only played one tournament when he was like 14, 15, and then never played again. And I could be wrong on that. I'm not 100%, but something like that. I think again, you're right with the maturity. I think that there's a lot of these like big time prospects that we see that again they don't advance as much in their game because they're set like sometimes they're so big that they make them play the big man and they want them to only do big man things. And I feel like in this tournament particularly, like from what we saw, all he did was play like the typical big man position. He didn't shoot a three, he didn't shoot many jumpers. I don't even know if he shot like an actual jumper. All he like what he did was scored a lot at the rim, in transition, dunks, played some really good defense. And And yeah, that was pretty much it. But you are right on that end.
Yep. All right. When we return, we're gonna dig a little deeper into his performance at the, I don't know how to pronounce it. I know it was a big 18U tournament in Spain, and we're gonna dig a little deeper into his performance. All right, last segment. You talked about like his performance in the tournament, and I see he averaged 12 points, 7.4 rebounds, 1.6 blocks, and 69% from the floor. But he did this in like 15 minutes per game. Why did he only play 15 minutes per game?
There's two reasons. There's a positive reason and there's a negative reason. So the positive reason is that they were winning every game or most game by like 40, 50 points. I think their game against NB Torrance, I remember I watched that one like fully in person, and I see that they win the game 100-35. Mohamed Dabone had 17 points, 9 rebounds, 5 blocks in 15 minutes, 14 minutes of play. So that's one reason. A lot of their main guys didn't play too much at the end of the games. Like he didn't play the entire fourth quarter. But then the other reason is also because you got in a lot of foul trouble, and that was the biggest concern that I came out of this tournament. And you can attribute that to the maturity, like you were saying, maybe the maturity. Sometimes you can tell that he wasn't exactly ready for the level of physicality. As physical as he is, you can't expect him to fully hold his ground against some of the biggest 18-year-olds out there, you know? This is the top talent in Europe, or some of the top talent in Europe, at least the top talent in Spain. And I mean, look, he did look good in multiple occasions, but against some of the bigger guys, he did tend to struggle. The foul trouble was a big thing. I think he had 4 fouls in a lot of games. I don't know exactly how much it is to foul out in U18 basketball overseas. I know it's different between different leagues, but I do know he got in a lot of foul trouble. Sometimes when he gets overwhelmed by some of the bigger players, he tends to be a bit more physical or try to be more physical, and that can lead to some kind of silly fouls. But that's kind of what I came out of the tournament with. Not too many jumpers, again, like I mentioned earlier. But when he got to the rim, he was efficient, nearly 70% from the field. But that's kind of what I took away from the tournament.
All right, here's I guess, a trick question for you. Let's just put on your lens into 2031, and let's just say he continues to mature and progress and gradually, right? I mean, he already has like an incredible head start, but let's just say he progresses gradually. What does he look like as a prospect?
One of the more experienced young prospects we'll see, one of the most physically gifted young prospect we'll see. Like again, like we were saying, the fact that he's 13 and built this way means that he's going to fill his frame eventually. And while he fills, and if this is already level he's at right now, in like 3, 4 years when he's like 16 years old, he's going to be built like an 18, 20-year-old. And that's ridiculous to think of. And you know, you're saying you saw him shoot threes. I didn't see him shoot threes in this tournament. Probably not what they asked him to do, but he like that's the thing. If he develops the three and he showcases it in the next few tournaments that we see him in, that's going to be a massive problem. Like he looked comfortable shooting it in the Adidas Next Generations tournament. I remember he hit this one top of the key three.
Yep.
It looked really good with smooth one in.
And then
And
like
if
the
he
next one
continues,
I saw just looked like it was just a banger.
yeah,
So
that's what happens with a lot of international bigs. Like if you want to start them shooting early, that's great thing, you know. But yeah, so you're gonna get some ugly misses. But I think as it goes on, that and then mixed with the playmaking I was talking about, the fact that he's hitting those Kevin Love outlet passes at the age of 12 to guys in the front of the court is kind of crazy. So I think that progression itself can lead to him being one of the better long-term prospects all time.
yeah, yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Like I said, just if even if he just improves gradually, what does that look like? I mean, is he going to have? I mean, how experienced is he going to be going into his rookie year? I mean, we talk about Luka Doncic and how experienced he was and played in EuroLeague Final Fours. I think two of them, maybe. I know one. I know two for sure that he played in before he got to the NBA. One of them he won the EuroLeague. And actually, I lived in Turkey during the 2016-17 season. And so I actually had a chance to see Luka before he blew up the year before he got to the draft. And I remember just seeing like how good he was. I saw that he was tough. I saw that, you know, teams are trying to attack him late in games, you know, just because of how young he was and how he never backed down. He competed. There was one time where I saw like, okay, he is young, and it was the Panathinaikos crowd, and I don't know what they were saying. And you know, like if you've been overseas, you know, there's absolutely no limit to what the crowds will say. I mean, I've asked like, what are they saying? And the person will translate what they're saying. I'm like, I can't believe there's like 10,000 people talking about a player's mom. And I mean, the crowds are absolutely brutal depending on where you go. And so there was a tournament where I saw like the crowd like really rattled Luka. It was Panathinaikos, and it was I think it was a playoff game in Athens, and that arena is pretty scary to go into for
Yeah,
anybody.
I saw the video from outside the outside arena they had a few days ago. I think
Oh
there was
yeah,
like
yeah.
this clip that was ridiculous. Like the atmosphere in that looks like ridiculous to play in.
I got to go to that. So my first time going to a Panathinaikos game, I remember just like filming the crowd the whole time. I mean, it was crazy. Then I went to a game a couple of years ago. They played Panathinaikos was playing Maccabi Tel Aviv, and I had a friend leave me tickets. And I wrote about this in an article that I put out yesterday on NBA Big Board. I touched on it briefly, but the crowds are so rowdy, and the fan bases are so likely to get in fights that if you're go to like a Panathinaikos game, and depending on who they play, if you have tickets from the opposing team, you're literally caged into one section of the arena. You can't like go to the bathroom. You can't like go to the concession stand. A police officer has to like open the gate to let you sit in this section because they fear that the fans will like fight, which they will. I mean, they don't have gun problems over there, so it's pretty cool. When actually for me, it is when I see the fans just get to fight, and then the police break it up, and then they just go back to their seats. But anyway, that's the type of like pressure environments that he's possibly going to be talented enough to play in a couple years. But will he be mature enough to handle that? And that's one of the concerns. But I mean, like if you think about it, like you said, maybe six more ANGTs. He could. I mean, he could actually like have 4 years of like ACB experience, like legitimate ACB experience. ACB is the domestic league in Spain, but 4 years of legitimate ACB, maybe some EuroLeague experience before he enters the NBA draft. But with that said, like if the progression just like athletically continues to like improve, or you know the feel for the game, but the passing is the thing that probably intrigues me a little bit more than the shooting, because even if he doesn't develop a single jump shot outside of 5 feet, I think he has the tools to just be a phenomenal rim runner, play finisher, vertical lob threat. But the passing intrigues me, and if there is a place in the world to like develop your passing skills and learn how to be a playmaker, it's Spain, because I can't think of too many bigs from Spain that can't pass. Like I mean, from the Gasol brothers. I mean, even if you talk about Adai Mara, you talk about Ethan Almanza. If you're a big and you grow up playing in Spain, you're going to be a plus passer. And if he adds that to his game, he's going. I mean, he's
Yeah.
already special. I think he's going to be really, really, really like incredible to watch over the next few years.
I mean, look, he also played this summer. He played summer, not summer league, preseason games with their real team, with the actual Barcelona team, or he trained with them at least. I don't think he actually played, but they
Yeah.
did an international tour, or I think they went to play some different teams, and he trained with them at 12 years old, supposedly. Which, I mean, if he's already getting that type of love from their franchise, you can really expect that maybe like in a few years he's actually ready to play, or they consider him ready to play with them like full time. So that's going to be a big thing to watch in the next few years.
Do you think he could be a game changer as far as just the way international basketball is covered from the youth perspective? I feel like with Luca, we didn't get a chance to really watch him play a lot in the youth tournaments because he was so good, and then he had the years where he had a smaller role with Real Madrid. But do you think like Dabone has a chance to like revolutionize the way youth basketball is covered
I
internationally?
mean,
I mean, he's already like an internet sensation at such a young age. But I wonder, like, I mean, even with Victor, I felt like I went to a game in Paris, Victor's last year there, and it wasn't even sold out. Like they gave tickets to kids to fill up the arena, and I wonder could Dabone, not saying he's Victor or Luca, but I wonder could he be the one that like packs out arenas or has like a massive fan base or following at a young age that he just they're able to like monetize his popularity. Do you think there's a chance for that?
I mean, look, the fact that he's going to be in this system for so long is going to give them a lot of time to think about how to do it. I think the fact that he's a big is going to be a lot easier for him to kind of get into these rotations earlier rather than later. I think, again, we saw with Victor. Victor was a starter. Luca was a special case, but I feel like a lot of these clubs that are focused on winning, that are like notably they're full with NBA talent, like Barcelona, like we were saying with Real Madrid and Hugo Gonzalez, that he's maybe not getting his fair shine because it's so deep at that forward position. But being 6'10, 6'11, who knows how tall he'll be at 16, 17, or how big he'll be. It already gives him the physical advantage of being able to play on a squad like that. And I think that, I mean, if they figure out earlier rather than later what they want to do with him, like his progression in the league and him playing in ACB, like you said, maybe for like 4 years, I think that can potentially help him go a bit further monetization wise than some other guys.
Yep. I mean, even with Victor, and we can wrap up on this, I feel like Asvel didn't really know what they had in him. I mean, he was already going to be the number one pick in 2023 if he stayed at Asvel, but you were able to see like how talented and, just more of his game when he transferred to the Metropolitans 92, which now I think that team is like bankrupt. But
Yeah, it's gone. I don't think it's there anymore.
yeah, I mean, you see like, and I've been to that arena a few times. I saw like during the Olympics, that was like the place where like Team USA practice and all that. But here's a question for you, and we'll end on this. Let's say he gets reclassified. like,
Mm.
like, okay, there's an error on his birth certificate, and the first person whose birth certificate gets reclassified, and they bump him up into 2008 generation. Is he the number one prospect in the 2008 generation?
So first off, there's a little to no chance that happens. I don't think Barcelona would have enough, how to say, pride to say, yeah, we made a mistake, and for them it's a benefit. But 2008, I think he's definitely up there. I mean, it's him, Hugo Yimga. He's the number one international guy in 2008 right now, to me at least. And it would be between them two, I think. I think he'll take the one or two spot depending on how he progresses in the next year. If tomorrow they come and say that he's a 2008 born prospect, maybe not number one, but he's definitely up there. And I think that when people talk about him saying like, oh well, he's not actually 12, he's not actually 13. I think that if he did come up and we found out that he was born in 2008, I think he'd still be a highly regarded long-term prospect and with tons of interest.
Yeah, I mean, I had an agent tell me that even based off of his real age, or what they assume is his real age, I don't want to like say it's a guarantee, but they're like he's the best player in Europe, best prospect in the world if he were born in what they believe is 2008. Well, that wraps up this episode. Let us know your thoughts on Mohamed Dabone. If you've seen him play, let us know your thoughts. If you haven't, go to YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, type in Mohamed Dabone. You don't even have to type in his name. You can just put like 12-year-old or 11-year-old,
Barcelona.
Giannis Antetokounmpo, and you'll see like the most incredible display of athletic talent you've ever seen on an 11-year-old. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. We went way into the future. We're talking 2030, 2031 NBA draft. But thank you for making this your first episode of the day. For your second listen, you got to check out Locked On NBA. That's where the local experts keep you updated on all of the biggest storylines ahead of the season. And you can find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Once again, This is Rafael Barlowe with Alec Kichian, Mr. Draft Point 2024 on Twitter, and we are out of here.